Let's build a sorcery deck. Hail Sorcerers, Rude here, and welcome back to the archives. Today we're going to be talking about something that is core to playing sorcery, which is building a deck. I know a lot of us get started with the pre-constructed decks and ease into gameplay through that, and it's natural to then want to transition into making some of your own decks, but it can be a little intimidating. So we're going to discuss the basics today, related specifically to constructed deck building. Sealed and draft are they're totally different beasts, so today we're going to be talking about the basics of constructed deck building. First things first, what I like to do when I approach building a deck is really think about my goal. What do I want to accomplish? Is it building a really fun and kind of engaging theme deck? Is it trying to build something that's super competitive and it's going to have the highest win percentage? Really thinking about what the goal is first things first for building the decks. I like to think of it in terms of visual representation as a y-axis and an x-axis, one having a more subjective, fun meter, which is more based on the feel of the deck and how you feel playing it, and the second being the competitive measure, which is more objective in terms of the win percentage. Now, what I like to do is try to aim for high fun, high competitive, or high fun and low competitive. So just because a deck doesn't have an incredibly high win percentage doesn't mean it's not something that you should try to build. Now let's get into the basics. What we need to do first is think about the type of deck that you want to create. Here I usually recommend thinking about either an avatar, an element, or a particular theme or type of approach that you want to take. This should really guide the rest of your deck building process, including creating your spellbook and your atlas. Once you've selected one of those three, next is to transition to starting to choose the cards that you're going to add into the deck. Sorcery constructed play requires that you have a minimum of 40 cards in your spellbook and 20 cards in your atlas. There's also some additional rules related to the number of cards that you can include from each of the rarity types. You can only have one of each unique, 2 of each elite, 3 of each exceptional, and 4 of each ordinary. That applies to both sights as well as spells in your spellbook. I also like to think about the mana curve. When you're building a deck, I think about the game in terms of 3 phases: early stage, mid stage, and late stage. We want to think about the win condition for the deck. What is it that's really going to propel you towards that victory? And this is where we get back to thinking about the goal, right? So for a really highly competitive deck, the win condition might be getting your opponent to death's door and winning the game. But for a deck that's a theme or focusing on trying to do some really fun combos, the win condition might actually be pulling the combo off. You might not win the game, but really fun to actually get that combo off and be able to see that thing that you had thought about in the deck building process actually unfold. One of the other win conditions that I love is just having a really enjoyable time with an opponent that I'm just meeting for the first time. So for those of you who know me, I love going to different events and trying to increase the engagement with the community. For me, a win condition might just be showing up at the event and actually getting to play some games. Regardless of how well I do competitively, I've won if I just was able to play some games. Now, thinking about that mana curve, as I'd mentioned, you want to try to build these basic decks focusing on having a number of cards with the 1 to 3 mana, which I would consider to be early stage, 4 to 6 mana, which I would consider to be mid game, and then the 7+, which is that late game. And I typically try to think of a ratio of 4 to 4 to 2. So for beginner decks, you want to focus on getting some engagement with the board really early in the game. So having about 4 to 2 can help you to do that. And with 40 cards in the deck, you're really going to be putting a good number of cards that'll be able to be played early in there, and that'll help you to start to feel out the game itself and see if the deck is really doing what you want to do. Those early game cards can also be used in late game and sometimes even more plentifully. So say for instance you're using Boss Troll, which is a really popular card now. You might be able to drop one of those early in the game. If you pull a couple later though, you can drop 2 in the same turn, which can then achieve that goal of kind of putting those minions out there more quickly. You also want to think about your threshold. So threshold is something that's going to be determined by the types of cards you select for your deck. I like to think about threshold in a way that helps me to imagine what I would call a mana curve. So with the cards that you're using, do you have a lot of high threshold cards that will require more of a specific element in the deck? Or do you have a lot of cards that are lower on the threshold requirement, which may give you some more flexibility to throw some sites in there that don't have threshold being granted as part of their ability? It also helps to think about, will I need mana ramp for this deck? If I'm thinking of a fun theme deck with really huge minions and putting out some gigantic spells, you may actually need to throw in some of the Alchemy 9. So that might look like the cores, the stone, or even some of the mixes. Finally, when we're putting this all together, remember that the ultimate goal of building the deck is just putting your ideas down and not being afraid to test them out. So I would encourage you to try to put together as many decks as you can and start to learn the card pool. Really see what fits for you. And if it helps you feel any better, the first couple of decks that I made were absolutely terrible on the competitive side of things, but I had a blast playing them. And that got me a little more comfortable building the decks in general and helped me to move into that competitive side of things. So I'd encourage you to try to put decks together. Just because one might not work out the way you'd hoped it worked out, then see if you can tweak some things. And ultimately, you're going to get to a place where you're really comfortable with it. I hope you have a blast building decks. If you have really fun decks that you'd like to share, please drop in the comment section below. Curiosa is a great resource for sharing decks and getting deck ideas, and I would love to see some of the decks that you've creatively created, whether it be related to a competitive deck or something that's just more fun and theme focused. So thanks for joining. If you've liked this video, please feel free to share it, like, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and we're so excited to see so many new members joining. I hope to see more of you at events, Tabletop Simulator, and Contesting the Realm. Root out.